Good morning, Kate. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Brad, how are you?
Good. Yeah, good. Thanks. Good to have you with us, Kate. And we'll get straight into it, Kate. As I say, you've had a fascinating life. World champion triathlete, entrepreneur, TEDx speaker. You've achieved a lot. And the first question, before we go into more deeper points around goal setting and purpose and sustainability and that sort of thing, which are all things that you're very passionate about. What's one thing that you've achieved that you are most proud of?
The one thing I'm most proud of, it sounds really simple, but it was the first run I did after my breakup with my fiance. That it'd been 9 years, I'd done nothing for myself. And the first time I dug my trainers out from under my bed, dusted off the brush and the dust and put them on my feet, that was the proudest moment because that was when I actually changed my future, if that makes any sense. That's my
Yeah,
proudest moment.
proudest moment, absolutely. And what was the moment for you? Because you've said it before. I think you said it on our call a couple of weeks ago, and in a number of interviews that you're an ordinary girl from Wales, but you've done some extraordinary things, and you speak a lot about being able to change your course of your life and that sort of thing. What was the moment for you that was that turning point in your life?
It was quite a dramatic. It's something I talk about a lot. Is unfortunately a lot of us wait for that cliff edge moment, when the doctor sits us down with the ominous diagnosis that we need to change something. So my cliff edge moment was 6 days before my wedding, when my partner of 9 years left me, and he also left me with $1 million debt, and then started to attack my family. Actually, he put a lot of death threats out, and my family were into police watch, and it was quite a tumultuous time for me. And there was no reason other than there was no reason he needed to do that. So my cliff edge moment was to basically living in this enormous amount of debt, realizing for 9 years I hadn't put myself first, that I needed to start simply loving myself. I needed to start honoring myself, because if I didn't, other people would treat me like him again and put my family at risk. So it was quite a dramatic moment, but ever since then, I've made the commitment to not wait for yet another cliff edge to make that change. So I've always looked for motivation to make positive change rather than the impetus of running away from that fear-driven or that demon or whatever that might be inside or externally in my life.
And your career's gone all over the place. I mean, you were doing engineering in France, and then you set up businesses in Australia in the hospitality industry before becoming a world champion triathlete, and you did that in 18 months from your first run. I mean, what was your inspiration behind firstly going to Australia and becoming a successful entrepreneur and selling businesses, and then becoming a triathlete alongside that? Because I run a business, and it's hard enough to do that and go for a run in the evening. So what's sort of your motivations in that?
Yeah, I became an engineer to satisfy the society tick list, is what I call it. So my parents wanted me to be an engineer. They wanted a daughter to be proud of and go to university. So I knew engineering wasn't my calling. I did it pretty much just to please them. So to move to Australia my passion was to travel and experience new cultures and a new sort of way of living. And setting up hospitality was an easy into owning my own business and becoming my own boss and carving my path in life. How I squeezed triathlon is I would just stop feeding excuses. It sounds really simple, but if we actually took the amount of time we spend explaining why we can't do something and actually did it, we probably would have done it. So the day I realized that I'd always wanted to be a triathlete, in that perfect moment, the perfect day when all the stars aligned and I had 20 hours free every single week, was never going to happen. I had to make it happen. And that's when, as I said, I started to run. I just aimed to be a world champion because I didn't know my own potential. And to be my best, I had to aim to be the best. So I just started to mirror and copy time management techniques, or how to run more effectively in shorter paces of time, how to sleep less as well, so that I could squeeze it in. So that meant, training till 10 p.m. at night, waking up at 4 a.m, so I'd still be at work at 8 o'clock every single day.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are guilty of that, waiting for the right time to do something, and it never really materializes. And we're seeing it a lot with not just our own business, but other businesses that we're coming across, that a lot of ideas that they've had have kind of been fast forwarded because of the current situation that we find ourselves in. So can completely relate to that. And you talk about time management skills there.
Mm.
there's always something that everyone's here looking to improve, that sort of thing. What methods did you use in that respect?
In one thing, I stopped talking about it. I just did it. I realized the amount of times I sit down and say, do you know what? I'm thinking about doing X. And then I'll talk about what, doing X would look like. And then how am I going to do it? I just stopped talking about it and just started doing them immediately. Sometimes I learn on the job. So I'd make mistakes and I'd pick myself up. But other times I'd find quicker and more effective ways of achieving it. So a simple example, in the morning when our alarm clock goes off, hands up who actually gets up on their first alarm clock, or do we press snooze? If we actually set the time that we're really going to set up, first up, that's a matter of integrity. We're training ourselves to do what we said. So if we say we're going to go and do a triathlon, because I can see Claudia saying she'd love to do one in the chats, and our actions start matching it, we actually will achieve things quicker and more effectively. So I don't believe there is a time, 5 steps to being more effective in time. It's just, if we say we'll be there at 10, be there at 10. And we'll find time naturally falling into our laps and being able to do stuff with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Having that integrity and the accountability. Also, one thing I do on the alarm clock, I've started doing, leaving my phone the other side of the room, so I have to get up and attend to it, and that's definitely working. Kate, you do a lot of work in different areas, and you're passionate in different areas, and you've got a great surname to align yourselves with what you do in it being strong. And you talk about having a strong purpose and that sort of thing. And particularly at the minute, I think that's a lot of something that people are thinking about, their purpose in their business and where they're moving forward with their business. Things are changing a lot. How would you define purpose, and how would one define their own purpose?
I think purpose is what makes your heart sing. It's what we seek out to do every single day. And we can see it not just in work, but we can also see it in when we're walking down the street, when we're interacting with people in our lives and our family as well. So for me, purpose is something that is part of me. It's more me than my name, actually. So we might carry a job title for a few years or a business title as well, but the purpose is consistent throughout. How to define it? I actually put it as can't think of the word. I'm terrible with grammar, but it's like an action word. So for me, service is my purpose. It's to serve others. So we find a word that resonates with us, so it matches throughout that. And for me, it's also being able to tie it into leaving something bigger than myself. I'm a strong believer that we have to do things for ourselves. Putting ourselves first and being selfish is something that is missing in the world. The more selfish people, the more we can give to others. Sick people can't help other people. Thriving individuals can, but make sure that purpose spirals out into larger communities and we can leave that legacy elsewhere as well.
Excellent. And you talk a lot about goal setting as well, and we'll now cover that. And you say a lot of the goal setting and avoiding goal setting is around that fear of failure. So what did you do to set yourself goals in your different achievements, but also how do you work with businesses to help them set goals, and what can people here take away from in regards to setting goals themselves?
The goal has to be in alignment with what our purpose is. I think money is only a driver for a certain point. We need to know we're going to feel something. At the end of this meeting or this talk with me, people won't remember what I said, they'll remember how I left you feeling. So that's the same for our interactions with our purpose and our own goals. How do we want to feel having accomplished or even strive to accomplish something? Because we don't want to get attached to that gold medal. We don't want to get attached to that 10x figure or X number of clients, but we want to feel what? Proud, satisfied, confident, joyous. How do we want to feel at the end of it? And for goal setting, I always make sure I've got a big goal. So as you know, in 2 years' time, I'm attempting a world's first challenge. But to break it down, I've got a goal by the end of this year. So I've got tripwires or those micro goals that will help me keep moving forward. So if COVID happens, or if a lockdown happens, I'm not left reacting wildly because all my goals have changed. I can just slightly reposition, but know that my purpose and my longer term vision is still set in stone.
Absolutely. We'll talk about that challenge a little bit in a couple of minutes' time. But one thing that you're also very passionate about is sustainability. You've got a passion for working with sustainably driven businesses, I've got it here that your slogan is for people, for planet, and for profit. What exactly? Because when I think of sustainability, I think it's a responsibility for the big corporates of the world, but it's for everyone, really. What is your mission with making the business world more sustainable, and how can people think more sustainably?
Yeah, well, corporates are made up of lots of people. So if everyone was actually more sustainable and thought of our impact elsewhere, then even corporates, even those big bad people or corporations would be doing good as well. But it's just about, for me, it's a level of thinkingness. So again, if we take my spiral of selfishness out there, if I'm making sure that I'm looked after, I've got an abundance of health, I've got enough money in the bank to look after my life, I'm then in a position to ask my neighbour, how can I support you? Then I can spiral out further and further. And on a very simplistic level, that's a similar model for businesses. If we start to make sure that the company is profitable, it means that they can leave a positive legacy. And then we can start impacting positively the environment, which might just be where their employees work, making sure that they're in an ergonomic environment that works for them, as well as then looking at our social infrastructure, making sure that we can keep leading as a pioneer. How else can we do this? What else could we be leaving as a positive legacy? So it's not, we sometimes think of the Amazon rainforest and indigenous cultures, which are very important, but we can also look on a micro level within our immediate organization as that environmental and social impact as well.
Mm. And someone's just asked a question that was coming right out of my mouth there. What sort of businesses have you been involved in, and who are you working with from all areas of your expertise?
I've worked with quite a spectrum, obviously, because my background is quite diverse. I've worked with startups who have pivoted from offline to online communities. So I've got a dance teacher who's actually grown her business 3 times during COVID for us being able to position the longer term vision, as well as organizations that supply into the military of defense to make sure that they're offering a wider scope of services and also positively impacting the world. So they're in a pivotal moment, making sure that their services are used for goods, not just for defending our country. So yeah, it's been I love my job because it is quite diverse. I'm in a fortuitous position to choose who I work with as well. So I always make sure the core of it is people want to have core values and they want to lead with those. Whether they work in one sector or another is actually quite irrelevant.
What we'll talk about more or less as we're coming towards the end, Kate, anyways, is your next challenge, and it is a world's first. So give people an overview about what you've got coming up, and it's not an easy one.
Sure. So sitting in lockdown, so just to put it into context, at the beginning of the year, I decided to go nomadic. So I was traveling the UK, house sitting for people and enjoying living in nature and taking up the occasional Airbnb as well. And then lockdown happened. Luckily, my partner and I were already talking about moving in. So whilst then moving from this amazing free lifestyle of adventure and moving into a 2-bedroom flat with my boyfriend and his 2 sons with no garden as well, I started to think, where am I compromising? Am I playing a little small or settling in my life? And I fell upon sport. I fell upon this adventure thing and thought, well, what are my dreams that I've been putting on that one-day list? And why am I waiting? Because I'm 41, every day I'm the youngest I'll ever be. So why am I not starting today? So I've made this a little bit of an adventure, slightly ignorantly, without knowing what I was doing, but it is actually happening. So in June 2022, I'm cycling in the world's toughest road race called RAM, Race Across America, which is 3,000 miles covering 12 states from coast to coast. 2 months later, around the 20th of August, I'll be swimming the toughest toughest channel swim, which is the English Channel, so 21 miles of swimming. And then a few months after that, I'll be slow traveling to Nepal, where, as some people guessed earlier on the table, I will be attempting to summit Everest. So no one's ever done all 3 before, and not in 10 months either.
Wow! And what's your inspiration behind that? What is your why to taking on that sort of challenge?
I want to demonstrate that we all are living well beneath our potential, that we have all created, and society at large, this glass ceiling of how we should be operating and functioning. And I just want us to break through that. And if that's by me doing something that no one else has done, and in particular, if I can say a female, because only 18% of Everest summiters are females, only 18% of RAM finishers are females as well. I want to demonstrate that we have all of these unconscious biases and prejudices around, especially sport and elite thinking, that if we stopped feeding our stories and started feeding the reality, we could really solve pretty much 90% of what we're faced today if we started to operate from that higher elevated state of thinking and being. So that's my driver. And I'm also doing it a little bit around inequality as well, to make sure that we demonstrate that, again, this unconscious biasness that we sometimes operate from how we perceive people rather than how they actually are. And so I do want to start bringing equality into other genders, religions, races, and socioeconomic backgrounds as well.
Fantastic, great. Well, we've got a minute or so, Kate, so I'll pull up a couple of questions here. Andrew Siegel's asked, and this is no surprise as he works in insolvency with businesses, how did you deal with the debt? Were you forced into bankruptcy, or did you manage to avoid or contest it successfully?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I chose not to go into insolvency or bankruptcy. So I worked 7 days a week, 10 hours a day by myself in the guest house. And I outsourced as many of my resources to give myself consistent income. So the restaurant I actually outsourced and took a monthly rent. And I did borrow a little bit of money from my parents to cover the high interest expenses. So I didn't have to pay 20% to the bank every single month. And so at the end, when I was able to convince my ex to sell our asset, which was the property, I could then pay off all my debt. So I just, for 2.5 years, went into maintenance mode, took as little as possible from me just to pay for my triathlon entry fees. And at the end of that, I was able to pay everything off.
Fantastic. Someone's asked, what is slow travel to Nepal?
It's any other travel other than flight. So yeah, I'm going to most probably catch a train, but it could involve boats or hitchhiking or driving, but I just want to avoid traveling on the plane for that section.
Fantastic. So you'll be nice and tired before you have to then start climbing Everest.
And it's through some quite gnarly countries. I hadn't actually looked, so it's going to be quite politically hard to go through Iran and other countries like that.
No, I'm sure. And Ryan from the Outdoor Thinking Company has asked, how did you feel when you were on the start line of your first triathlon?
Well, my first Ironman, to tell you the truth, I actually wet myself. I was so scared. And then I burst into tears and my goggles felt fogged up. So I had to take them off and wash them every 5 minutes when I was swimming. So I was in a state of complete shock that I was doing it. And then it turned to elation because I realized I was doing it. So yeah, absolutely petrified.
Fantastic. Well, Kate, I'm glad we fixed the technical issue there and got back to the end, but we've got to just finish it up there. But thanks very much for joining us, Kate. And I know you'll stick around in the room for the next half hour or so. So I'm sure people can ask you some further questions. But thanks very much, Kate, and we'll speak to you again soon.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Bradley.